and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, the elusive and unknown Cardinal of Colorado. It's Cardinal Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
That's right. I'm one of the secret highest-ranking church leaders.
What a wonderful organization that is. That could be a secret, high-ranking member that nobody knew about that could come be Pope.
Honestly, it sounds very dramatic, and I totally see the appeal.
Was all laid out by God in the Bible, all of it.
Imagine if you needed 3 people to get you dressed for work, because your outfit is that complicated.
I was going to talk to you about this, but I really need like a necklace and hat removal guy. How do we arrange that? Can Doof Media pay for that?
We can do that. Let's prioritize that.
Does it matter that I don't wear necklaces or hats regularly?
I mean, he can be on standby for whenever you feel up to it.
Okay, that's good. I like it. This week on the show, our series covering the Best Picture nominees for this year's Oscars continues with this week's movie. We're going to be talking, if you haven't guessed already, about the film Conclave, a story of popes.
Is that the subtitle?
It should be if it's not.
Should be.
We're going to be talking all about Conclave. Before we get into this, though, Matt, I did just want to update everyone. It's official now. The Oscar nominees came out this morning, so we officially have all of our list is complete. We have some small adjustments to the list we have to make. So 2 of the films that I predicted that were going to be Oscar nominated, the film Sing Sing and the film A Real Pain, were not nominated, so we're kicking those 2 off.
Okay.
And we're adding The Substance and I'm Not Here. Now, some of these, Matt, are a little surprising. So The Substance is a horribly disgusting, I haven't seen it, but my understanding is a horribly disgusting tribute to body horror film.
Great.
That got 5 nominations in the Academy Awards, which is kind of insane, actually.
Yeah, I heard quite a bit about that movie. Unlike all the other movies on this list, I actually heard a lot about The Substance, and it never occurred to me that could ever possibly be an Academy Award contender. So,
well, everyone says that the Golden Globes don't matter anymore, and the Golden Globes are not indicative of what happens at the Oscars. And I think this is proof positive of the opposite of that. Demi Moore won for Best Actress at the Golden Globes. She gave an incredible speech, probably the best speech of the night, and then suddenly, The Substance just took off. And now suddenly here it is. I was actually predicting going into this week that Demi Moore would be nominated and win. I was thinking maybe the movie would could steal one of the Best Picture spots, but I wasn't sure on that. 5 nominations was not something I expected at all. So it's pretty cool for that movie. The other film, I'm Not Here, I don't know anything about at all. I had never heard of it. Apparently, a lot of other people were very surprised about that as well. So
is it I'm Not Here or I'm Still Here?
I'm, you know what? I think it's I'm Still. This just shows how much. So here's the problem is there was another film called I'm Still Here.
Oh my God.
Trying not to confuse it for that movie. So I'm, the result of that is that I just say the wrong name of the movie. So it's I'm Still Here. Thank you for keeping me honest on that. I believe this is another foreign picture. It's from Brazil. So I mean, it's cool. It's exciting. It's exciting to have a new movie that I had never heard of just suddenly pop onto this list. I'm a little disappointed because I was really looking forward to watching Sing Sing. And now I have to find time on my own time to watch that movie. Oh, Jesus. But I'm pretty excited to tackle this list, especially, Matt, after the movie we watched today, which I can say before we get into it, finally. Finally, there's one I like.
Yes, we're going to have a lot of good things to say.
I don't really want to talk about the Oscar nominations too much more outside of that. I will say one thing as kind of like a follow-up to our episode last week on Emilia Perez, a film we did not like very much, but also didn't dislike. We were very confused on it. It got 13 nominations at the Oscars, which is tied for the record number of nominations.
Fascinating.
Let me just give you a quick list of the other films that have gotten 13 nominations at the Academy Awards. Oppenheimer, Mary Poppins, Forrest Gump,
uh
of the Ring, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Gone with the Wind.
huh. You know, I I don't see it. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Now, the other one I didn't talk about here because it would be detrimental to my case is The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Also got 13 Oscar nominations. Shakespeare in Love also got 13 nominations. Chicago, the musical, also got 13 nominations. So, uh, you know,
So what you're saying is sometimes the Academy just does things.
I am kind of amazed by this movie that I think we both agreed was not very good, but was fascinating in its own right. That it just seems to just be kind of unstoppable. Like it seems like the best picture race is going to come down to Emilia Perez and The Brutalist, and that's kind of wild to me. Well, obviously, we haven't seen The Brutalist, so maybe we'll watch that movie and be like, "Yeah, Emilia Perez is way better than that." I kind of doubt it though. So
God.
just
God, I hope not.
just an interesting year for sure.
Uh-huh.
All
All
right, but
right.
let's get into this week's movie, Matt. A movie I'm actually very excited to talk to you about. Let's talk all about Conclave.
The Pope is dead. The throne is vacant.
What happened? They say a heart attack.
You know how rumor spreads, and 1.25 billion souls watching.
Well gotten, Lawrence.
It seems the responsibility for the Conclave falls upon you.
The supervision of this election is a duty I never thought I'd have to perform. They are sequestered, and they must be shielded from all news that may influence their judgment. You understand?
Matt, what is this movie all about?
When Cardinal Lawrence is tasked with leading one of the world's most secretive and ancient events, selecting a new pope, he finds himself at the center of a conspiracy that could shake the very foundation of the Catholic Church.
This movie was written by Peter Straughan and Robert Harris. It was directed by Edward Berger. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow. Oh, just those guys. Just those guys, huh?
Yeah, just
No one's ever heard of those guys.
No, not three fantastic character actors
Yeah.
at the top of their game. Yeah.
Also, Isabella Rossellini, who also absolutely kills it in this movie. Matt, talk to me about Conclave. What'd you think of this movie?
I think it makes sense for us to start with the acting, actually.
Sure.
Because that to me was the highlight. I've always liked Ralph Fiennes. I thought he was fantastic in this movie. He kind of disappeared into this movie in a way that this is like a weird backhanded compliment, because I always like Ralph Fiennes, but I don't find that he's always kind of like, well, that's Ralph Fiennes. He's super handsome, he's super charismatic, but in this role he became this cardinal. I appreciated that a lot. It's a movie that really rides on these intense dialogue scenes and subtle moments, a lot of nonverbal communications happening, and so the acting is crucial, and the acting soars. Like that was my favorite thing about the movie. That's definitely what I wanted to start with.
100%. I think this movie is a vehicle for performance,
Mhm.
and everyone absolutely kills it. Even the people that I haven't read on that list, those four central actors, I think outside of those actors, obviously they don't get as much time, but everyone's good in this movie. I think the man who plays Cardinal Adeyemi, who's a man named Lucian. I'm going to mispronounce this. I'm sorry. I apologize. But his name is Lucian Samadi. He's really, really good too.
Yeah.
He's really good. And then Carlos Diaz, who plays Cardinal Benitez, is also excellent. I mean, it's just, this is a movie that was created for performances. And so I think the acting is what gets the most attention here, and rightly so.
Yeah. And then, on top of that, it's basically it's sort of a political thriller, right?
Yeah.
If you had to put it in a genre, that's where you'd put it. And I thought it was like a B+ political thriller. I'm not saying I hated it. I'm also not saying I was like blown away by the twists and turns and the intrigue. I think the sort of the worst thing I can say about it is so there's a moment toward the beginning of the film where one of the cardinals, Stanley Tucci, is admiring the chess set that he used to play chess with the Pope over, and he's saying, I'd like to have that as a keepsake. And he says, and Ray Fiennes says, did you ever beat him? And he says, no, he was Stanley Tucci says, no, the Pope was always 8 moves ahead. And I was like, I see. This is an intricately plotted clockwork of a movie where there's going to be subtle power plays. And it's not like that wasn't true. It's just I kind of expected more. I kind of expected. It's almost like it was missing that final turnabout.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the. I agree with you, by the way. I think one of the things that is perhaps hurting this is this is a movie constructed to have this very clever kind of gamesmanship, but I think ultimately what the movie is saying about the concept of the conclave, and perhaps broader the concept of elections and how people decide things, is that it's all kind of stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the idea of like having these people like maneuvering people and outsmarting people, but like at the end of the day what happens is a guy stands up and gives like a rousing 45-second speech and nobody knows anything about him, but they're like, oh, it's him, that's the guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's who we're going with, and we don't know a thing about him except he gave this really good speech at one moment in this process, and so we're going to vote for him. So I think it kind of cuts its own legs out from under it, because you're right. Like what kind of gamesmanship happens here? I mean, the big kind of move was orchestrated to bring a nun around who had a previous sexual relationship with the front runner, right?
Uh-huh.
But so I okay, question about that. So John Lithgow's character Tremblay is adamant that he only did that at the Pope's request.
Uh-huh.
Is he telling the truth there?
I think it's intentionally ambiguous. I think it's somewhat likely that he did. So here's my, like, having thought about it for a few days, conspiracy theory is I'm going to take Stanley Tucci at his word. The Pope gamed this out. The Pope put Ray Fiennes in charge of it because he knew that this is a guy who is fair-handed and would make sure that no funny business was, unchallenged. Then he took who he knew would be the top contenders, and he essentially arranged them to all torpedo each other's reputations in public.
Mm-hmm.
And they all knocked each other. They all knocked each other out of the running, leaving only basically the one person without a tarnished reputation, and in fact not only not a tarnished reputation, but a like saintly reputation of like, this is the cardinal who has only ever served in the worst places. They're like, in terms of holiness, they just outstrip everyone else there. And it's interesting because you're right, we don't know anything about this person. The other cardinals don't know anything about this person, but since the entire board wiped itself clean, it's kind of the only remaining option, weirdly. I mean, part of me was almost felt a little bit, just a tiny bit robbed, because you think Lawrence is going to be the Pope, like you think that's what we're building to, and it makes sense that he's not, but it's like, why would they vote for this guy instead of Lawrence? like what is Lawrence, like Lawrence hasn't done anything to cut it to undercut his own reputation.
Matt, he gave a really good speech before the vote.
He gave a really good speech, and that's. I mean, so are you basically saying the movie is a sort of critique of the idea of like a closed election on top of everything else?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I think essentially I do. I think. Well, I mean, it's a really interesting movie, an examination of like power and lust for power, and like I love this how the movie like slowly admits that everybody wants this, even the people that are like feigning that they didn't want it. Even Ray Fiennes, our character, right? Like he's like, I have no interest in this, and of course he does. Of course I love that. Like every one of us has the name that we would be called if we were picked pope already picked out, every
Mm.
single one of us. And he's like, not me. And then of course later, yes,
Uh-huh.
yes he does, yes he
Yeah.
does. So yeah, I mean, I think like I do think this is, you could take this concept, and I think it is a pretty stark critique of the Roman Catholic Church, but also like a larger critique of this kind of, I mean we could say like a larger critique of democracy,
Uh-huh.
democratic elections at large, of how these incredibly important moments, and what, like, we can say this because we were both raised Roman Catholic. It's kind of ridiculous that we have just one guy that's in charge of everything, that is, according to the catechism, infallible and ordained by God to lead the church and make all the decisions for the church. But like, it's really important. If you are a Catholic, like, the entire movement of your church swings based off of this one guy and the decisions he makes for the church.
Mhm.
And so it does matter. And just, I think that's true in elections as well. I think it's just, it's irony that we watched this movie the week of the inauguration in
Yeah.
our country, but I do think this is a movie that is critical of how we make these decisions and how we decide who is going to lead us forward. And you know, we see that there are these factions, and we see like I think the movie, you know, builds the conservative wing of Catholicism, and essentially treats it as like a non-starter. This would be the worst thing that happened. These people are evil. But it doesn't absolve like I think the movie's on the progressive side, I guess we'll call it. But I think it doesn't dissolve the progressive individuals from gamesmanship and play and corruption and all these things either. So yeah, I mean, I think it's critiquing all these things for sure. And I think it's very fitting to take an ancient, ridiculous organization and then say, this is a metaphor for how you pick a president, America. How does that make you feel? Well, not good.
No, it's that's funny. I didn't consciously think about it as being about elections, but it does remind me a lot about primaries in particular, where there's this field of, I think once you get to the general, it's a kind of a different thing. But primaries do have this element of, like, very often there's the dynamics of, like, I don't need to be the best candidate, I just need to be better than the second best candidate. Sort of outflanking each other and finding angles of attack and sabotage and
yeah. Like, remember when Howard Dean made that weird noise and so he was done? I mean, that's like how I felt when I watched like it doesn't even matter Adeyemi if anyone actually knows what you did. Just the fact that there's the smell that there could possibly be something, and they're just done with you. He goes from 52 votes to 5.
Yeah.
They're just done with you. And yeah, it just, like, it feels so arbitrary.
Yeah.
And like, this is within the world of the Roman Catholic Church. This is the most important decision these men will make in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, wow. Wow.
I found myself, like, I think I had what I felt were unexpected emotional reactions to certain things. Like, you were describing the moment when Adeyemi, he's like, basically Lawrence tells him, like, okay, everybody knows about this. And he's like, so, but there's still hope for me.
Mm-hmm.
And Lawrence is like, no, there's not. And it's not because I'm going to ruin you. It's because enough information is already out that there's going to be a whisper campaign. And so what I mean by the emotional reaction is, like, the Adeyemi just starts weeping and he's just crushed. And like, I was surprised at how much empathy I felt for this character in this position, because he's not cast as a heroic character who you're supposed to admire. And his weeping is sort of like, so you don't get to be Pope. What are you so sad about? But I found it very easy to empathize with, like, well, you spend your whole life in this organization. You dedicate your life to this organization in a way that people like you and I don't dedicate ourselves to anything.
Mm-hmm.
There's a single-mindedness for someone who has become a cardinal. There's a single-mindedness where there is nothing other than the church. And you actually thought you had a shot at leading the church, and you feel like this is maybe what you were meant to do. And why not? After all, you've spent your whole life in this thing, and then it's ripped out of your clutches when you're just like right there. I can
Yeah.
empathize with that. So anyway, I thought that was interesting that I felt a lot for all, like, even the characters you're kind of not supposed to like. I was like,
Yeah.
I something about, I think it's also honestly something about Ray Fiennes' performance where he's just this like pensive, sad man,
Yeah.
and some of that, like, you like absorb some of that from him, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we meet him as this character who we're told is having a crisis of faith. He's not sure what he believes in anymore. Um, he seems to be doubting God, doubting the church, doubting all these things, and yet he is the one that I think behaves the most Christian
Mhm.
out of any of these people in this movie, which is really interesting. I agree with you on a DMA. Like that, we were told moments before that this man believes that all homosexual people should be imprisoned and will burn in hell. Like
Uh-huh.
that is what Bellini communicates about him. And it's not like I forgot that when I watched him sitting there weeping. But yeah, I mean, like the movie kind of intentionally wants you to empathize. I think it is through Ray Fiennes, who is being a Christian by sitting next to someone and comforting them in their troubled times and praying with them. Like that is what he is doing. Um, so yeah, I mean, the only person I think is just completely like you never sympathize with at all is they build up the Cardinal Tedesco as just
Yeah.
kind of an arch villain, and I actually kind of wish there was just a little more subtlety with that. Like I'm like I said, it's clear. Like the politics of the movie were pretty clear to me, right? Like this was a movie written from a progressive bent, probably examining the church and the progress the church has made over the last 50 years or whatever, and thinks that conservative in that mind is backwards and wrong, and and progress is the way forward. That's a viewpoint, by the way, I happen to agree with. But I wish the movie was a little more subtle about that. Like Tedesco just sucks. Like he
Yeah.
just really sucks. There's nothing redeemable about him at all. And so it just makes it just makes our options very clear. I think perhaps the idea of the film would have worked better if you the audience are like, well, I mean, I want Lawrence to be Pope because I like him, but like you could see like the indecision and uncertainty in the air rather than just being like, well, clearly that guy's the bad guy, so
Right.
we're choosing between these other guys.
I agree with you. I think I've seen people criticize this movie as being preachy, not to put too fine a point on it. And I think part of that is simply that it doesn't even really try to find like the steelman argument of like, why would you want the Catholic Church to be more conservative?
Yeah.
Where it's like, really, you really can't find like any reason why people in that position might legitimately want that. I'm not stating my opinion. I'm just saying I can very easily think of a religious person wanting their organization to trend more conservative, because it's
Yeah.
like why even have a church if you're not if it's not going to be a church, like,
Yeah.
like you can at least make the argument. And I don't think the movie really did make the argument. I think the guy, from the moment he's introduced, he's like aggressive. He like is like holding Lawrence's sleeve, and Lawrence like rips his sleeve away, and it's like this like really violent, like it's the closest thing to a physical confrontation in the whole movie. And it's like, yeah, this guy
Yeah, I
sucks,
mean,
like you said.
and he's clearly racist, right? Like
Mhm.
he's like, what do you want to have a black pope? We could
Uh-huh.
like he's clearly disgusted by that concept,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um and so I mean I think so maybe it's better to frame this as more, this is not an overarching critique of like primaries, or you put it, or election process, but like how progressives, let's say, Democrats, let's say, have a opponent on the other side that they think is unquestionably bad and wrong, and how can they unite in common purpose or fail to, right? Like there's a lot of talks about like the way you listen to Bellini kind of talk about Tedesco is the way you listen to, I mean, not to current event it too much, but like the way you listen to Democrats talk about Trump, right? Like
Mhm.
it is like, this guy is the worst thing that could possibly happen. He's going to undo all this progress. He's going to ruin everything. how do we do this? Like, and Lawrence's response is like, this is a conclave, Aldo. It's not war. And it's like, this is a war.
Yeah.
Like, it's very aggressive and very, and ultimately like ineffectual, I think, is the most important part.
Yeah.
Like, Bellini is completely ineffectual. Like,
Yeah.
he can't get anyone on his side. He can't do anything. And like Lawrence is just like standing there not trying and leeching votes from him.
Right. Yeah. Well, and all of the progressives, you know, their infighting essentially is what blows them. Like they take care of each other.
Yeah.
Tedesco doesn't even have to do that. And I think I'm getting the names right. It's like he would have won actually if forget all the characters' names if the final
Benitez.
if Benitez hadn't pulled out that 45-second speech at the last second, which is really, you know, it's just like, okay, well, that's literally just luck. And like you could imagine a version of this movie that ended very differently. I feel like the whole movie would have had to be different for that ending to feel right, but you could imagine it at least.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to talk about the ending. And what perhaps we think the ending is doing. So again, I do think my read, I mean, I don't know if my read's correct, but I like my read of this movie being kind of a critique of these systems and the way we make these decisions and choose leaders and do these kind of things. But the end of the movie is this all happens, right? This was if we believe what I think is accurate, this was careful machinations of the former Pope to kind of put his chess pieces in play, and everything unfolds exactly the way he wants. And what we're left with at the end of this is a character who we learn is a man, but also has female sex organs in him.
Yeah.
So I guess what was your kind of takeaway with what we're doing with that?
I don't know. Like it felt very out of left field at the last minute. You're like, well, we needed a curveball of some kind, because I said earlier, like the movie is missing the final, like, oh, but then you know, and but it felt perfunctory. Because to me, it doesn't work dramatically because nothing comes of it. And as a symbol or like as a thematic note, you're like, okay, well, we're, you know, this is along the same lines of making the church more open, more liberal minded, more accepting, the same kind of drum we've been beating the whole movie. And it's not like maybe it would have been one thing if Lawrence had been just a little bit of a bigot prior to this. and this moment is kind of a test for him, rather than just like, there's no doubt in that moment that Lawrence is going to be like, oh, okay, sure. Once he hears the old Pope approved of the situation, it's like, yeah, he's going to go along with it. And you know, the Pope being infallible, it's like, what else are you going to do? He's the Pope now.
Yeah, I agree. So here's my take on it, and I have no idea if this is what the movie wanted you to think or not. But so again, going back, I think this is a movie that is fiercely critical of these processes and these systems that decide these things. And so with that in mind, we're left with the movie kind of like this like, what the fuck, man? Like, this is how it happens. This is how it's done. One of the most important decisions in the world, and it's infighting between people who are all pretending like they don't want it, but of course they do. Like even Benitez wanted it, right? Like even he wanted it.
Yeah.
And he had a name picked out too.
And
like they, you know, there's a moment there where they extend the offer to him, and like it's kind of trying to play it as a reveal because you don't expect who it is, because you think at first it's Lawrence, and then he's the one that's offering, and it's like, oh my god, it's him. It's like, will you take this? And he's like, hell yeah. So you're left, I think, with a bad taste in your mouth a little bit about our processes, our institutions, our traditions, or if you're Roman Catholic, perhaps your entire church, you're left with a bad taste in your mouth about. And I think what this final reveal to me does is it does in the mix of this quagmire is this little speck of hope, this
Mhm.
little speck of, okay, but maybe something can be different. Maybe change can happen in the unlikeliest of places, in places you don't expect it, from people you don't expect, from things you don't quite understand. Because it is this man essentially serves as, you know, the like I think we haven't talked about it much, but there's a lot of subtext in this movie about the woman's place in the Catholic Church,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't. There are moments that it comes out and talks about it, but for most part, we're just kind of observing them in the background and how they're treated as second class citizens in the church.
Mhm.
And then so we have this person that it is the male and the female combined, representing kind of perhaps a unification of the church, to extend that out, unification of peoples. Um, and so to me, like what we're supposed to take away from that is, yeah, you might walk out of this movie feeling a little bit down about institutions and democracy and how we decide these things. But look, hope abounds. Like there is still hope. Like in this church, this pope will represent something fundamentally different from what has ever been before.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that is hope for a future. And I think that's what the movie wants you to feel with that moment.
I think you're right. So, a couple comments on that. First, I think there's a lot of supporting notes in the movie to support this idea. The fact that Tedesco, or not Tedesco, I totally forget everybody's name. The one who becomes Pope,
Benitez.
when he gives the blessing of the meal, one of the few things that he says is he thanks the sisters, which is not something any of the, you get the sense from the way that everyone reacts that this is not something that any of the other men even thought about for a second. There's thanking the sisters for their work, which is, it's like, if like that's like the most obviously Christian thing in the world, is like
Yeah.
to be grateful, to have gratitude.
Yeah.
And then the last shot of the movie is the three, I guess they're nuns. I don't really know the dress that well, but the three nuns running out of the side door, kind of happy. And that to me is like the spark of hope, and it's the three women representing it. And of course the
Yeah.
role of the sort of sister superior in things. So yeah, I think that's all in there. And it is subtextual, maybe just slightly too subtextual for my taste. I like to have things force fed to me, as you know. But that's fine. I think, and then the other note, just to riff on the other part of what you were saying about like hope in this man being able to change things. And this is more of just an observation about the Catholic Church than about the movie specifically, but like, it is the oldest continuing functional organization that exists.
Yeah.
So despite the fact that it seems patently ridiculous to organize your giant, literally international, enormous organization this way, apparently it works. And having having basically an elected dictator, which is kind of what the Pope is, and not
Yeah.
the church has a lot of unique things about it that make it not a nation. It's like historically things have been very carefully engineered so that no nation ever really felt like the church was a threat, and that's why this is able to work, I think, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these complicated details there, but like, short answer, yes, single popes can do an enormous amount of change in the way the church operates. When my when my grandparents were going to mass, they would like kneel on marble and listen to the priest say everything in Latin. Like
Yeah.
that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah. I mean, Vatican II, I don't know when exactly Vatican II happened. I feel like it was within our lifetime, right?
It was.
We were young.
Yeah, I thought
we were
it.
young.
I don't actually remember. I think
Okay, no.
even our parents might have experienced the
I'm
Latin
stupid.
Mass, though, right?
Yeah, Vatican II was the 60s, so
Okay.
it was before we were born, but like still, like
Yeah.
within our parents' lifetime.
Yeah.
Like that is like both my parents grew up Roman Catholic as well, and witnessed, and this is especially important for my mom as it relates to this movie, like witnessed an absolute transformation of the church
Mhm.
in that time to modernize it. Because you're right, like they mention it offhand in this movie that Catholic Mass was in Latin. Like it was in Latin, and John Paul II called together a Vatican Council in the 60s and said, we are going to modernize and change the church. And of course, modernize compared to our standards today would look ridiculous, but like it was a fundamental shift and change in the church. And like my mom grew up going to Catholic school and was taught by nuns and like saw the role that nuns were taking, the larger role that nuns were taking in the church under Vatican II, and was very encouraging to her at that time, and seeing that transformation in the church. And of course, we all know what happens after that. The Catholic Church has had some rough times, consequences of their own terrible actions. So obviously not perfect, continually growing organization. But like, I mean, the Pope right now has also pushed a lot of progressive modern things as well. And it's always kind of funny because, as we talked about, the Pope is supposed to be infallible. So like they're supposed to speak with the voice of God. So whenever they say something that the rest of the cardinals don't like, there has to be this like very careful, controlled like ability to dissent, but not in a way that makes it seem like you are literally contradicting God himself. It's very silly. It's very silly.
And this is totally separate from this movie, but like I've been sort of shocked, honestly, sort of scandalized at every once in a while I'll see people reacting to something the current pope has done, and they'll call him a false pope. And I'm like, you can't say that.
How are you allowed to say that? That's not how that works.
That's not, like this is not like you've got way too much 21st century American politics brain if you think that's gonna fly. like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I not having a dog in this fight at all. I'm still like you're not that's not an allowed move in this game. Okay. Anyway. So I'm trying to think what else I enjoyed. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the character moments. I liked a lot of little touches. Like I'm pretty sure somebody asked Lawrence where he finds his character, what is the nature of the struggle with faith, and I think he says prayer. I think he says the word prayer.
Yeah.
And then in the movie, like in the course of helping people deal with the situations, he ends up like helping them pray.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, so even for him, this is like despite the fact that that a lot about this sucks and is like really hard for him and he's under a ton of stress, maybe this is actually helping his struggle with faith. And I liked all that. I love all that stuff.
I mean, I guess at the end of the movie, do you think Lawrence is going to like quit his deanship and leave Rome like he said he was going to? Because I don't think he is.
I agree with you. I think that his faith has been, if not like, perfectly restored, it's been reinvigorated.
Yeah.
He clearly was happy with the choice of the Pope. And I think maybe he even came around to understanding the truth of what the old Pope said. Like, some priests are meant to be shepherds, some are meant to be managers, and you're a manager. And like, he managed this conclave very skillfully. Yeah. And like that's, and I think he realizes that also.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, we critiqued kind of some of the writing of this movie, and I think that was totally fair. But like, this is also a movie that some of the most tense moments in it, and they're incredibly tense, are, oh my God, did he just break that seal on that door? And, oh my God, is that nun gonna open the door? Is he gonna sit in the chair? What, like, it's ridiculous, but it is like, I think the tension in this movie really, really works. You're totally kind of invested in Lawrence and what he's going to do and the decisions he's going to make about this. I thought, I thought some of the visuals of this movie were also just like staggeringly beautiful. I think it's kind of a cheat code whenever you get to set something in Vatican City, especially when so much of your movie takes place in the Sistine Chapel, which is just objectively gorgeous, but also equally terrifying. Like I loved the moments where the camera just grabbed a spot on the ceiling of these paintings staring right down at you. Just really, really effective. Have you been to Vatican City?
I've not been to Rome at all. So
Oh man, I like Catholic, not Catholic, Christian, not Christian, like traveling to the Vatican is, I feel like, a must for people. It's like part of you goes like, what are we doing? Like if you're a Christian and you like read the Bible and listen to what Christ says, and then you go to Vatican City, your reaction is like, what the fuck? Like, he wouldn't like any of this. What are you doing? But it is also like staggering and beautiful, and you feel the history and the power and the importance of it all. And it's this weird contradiction, I think, of that, where you're just like, this is lavish and ornate, and therefore the opposite of everything we're supposed to have here, but also it's lavish and ornate and historic and beautiful. It's this remarkable contradiction that I think is at the heart of this movie. Like, again, getting to set it in the Sistine Chapel is like a cheat code in that. I did like, by the way, when the most striking image in the movie is when the bomb explodes, and it blows out the window, and it's just this wonderful image of like all these people in the Sistine Chapel, with an exploded window and light like beaming in from above, as if to say, like, it's as if like God himself is talking to them,
right,
and shining a light on what they need to do.
Of course, yeah, and that's the moment when I think Lawrence has, I think by assumption, just voted for himself. And God is telling him no.
But even outside of that image, like so much of like the camera work, and I think is excellent in this. It just, again, it gets to use all these the fancy ornate costumes and decorations, and I love that moment where all the cardinals are walking in and it's raining, so they all have the white umbrellas, and it's like just creates this very stark image of white and red mixed. Like I think it's great. It's a beautiful movie to look at.
It really enjoys the cardinal outfits and just like how beautiful and how rich that red is. Interestingly, it's apparently not quite the exact right red. I read that like they used an older red, like a red that they have retired actually from active use in cardinal outfits, because it was like, well, this one's prettier, so we'll use this one.
My favorite passage of the Bible is when Jesus is like, and you shall all wear funny red hats, and wear a big cross, that thing I died on, please wear ornate large ones around your neck at all times. Like the outfits are so silly, like they're like, but again, it's part of it. It's part of all of it.
It's the pageantry, and it's very fun. Like, even if you're totally right about the, like, moral dimension of it, it's like, the Catholic Church just has some pretty good aesthetics. You got it.
They have infinite money. Quite literally infinite money.
I wanted to I wanted to like ping off you talking about that shot with the light pouring in through the sky, through the window, through the broken window, because I noticed this is kind of funny. Okay, so I noticed repeatedly this movie does this thing with light, which I'm pretty sure is abnormal, where like there will be a character or a couple of characters in the foreground talking perhaps, and the saturation of those characters is very low. It's very dim. And then in the background of the shot, there will be like a window or a door, either like between them or maybe, on the right side of the frame, whatever, that's super bright, like fully blown out, bloomed. And I noticed this because ever since I had LASIK, if there's like a point light, it's got a huge bloom around it, which is normally not a problem when watching a movie, because usually the frame is all about the same level of brightness. So if there's a bloom, the bloom is just around like the whole screen, which is you don't really notice. But this was like, these two cardinals in the foreground are having a conversation, and the light in the background has bloomed in my literal eyeball to obscure them. So maybe you didn't notice this because you don't have literal eye damage, but it was, but I thought it was unusual. And then, you talking about like the light leaking in from above, like I wondered if this isn't a visual metaphor of like these characters are having these kind of sordid, um, low political scrabbling debates, and in the background of the shot is this holy light
God, right? Yeah.
leaking, the sort of trying to encroach on the scene.
Yeah, like desperately trying to pull them into the light of
Mhm,
God. And they
mhm.
are, yeah. No, I love that. I did not notice that. But I've been clicking through images while you were talking about that, and I found a couple that I think match exactly what you're talking about. So um that's great. I think you're spot on there. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I what's funny is I didn't think about the metaphor dimension until like literally until you mentioned the light leaking in through that one window, and I'm like, oh, that one window is connected to all of the windows that we
Yeah.
see in the movie, like clearly.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
so
yeah, and
yeah,
there is a very real like speaking of like when they like sequester, like there's that one scene where we see the shades on that window slowly go
mm,
down, right?
mhm,
Like it is this it is this interesting ceremony that is supposed to be extremely private. They go into the Sistine Chapel, gorgeous building, to do the actual vote. But yeah, like light is there's no light in there. It's very dark. Yeah, I think Berger, the director, lights that room just very 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 dark um but beautiful. Like it's a beautiful place, but he lights it very low. And so I think it is. It's like this kind of like we're doing this secret thing, it's supposed to be like to capture and express the will of God, but we are doing it kind of external to God's presence,
mhm.
which I think is part of the point it's making. I mean, we could extend the we've been talking about elections a lot, obviously, like election. God has no place in our election, which of course is not true, but like not a physical presence. This idea that these decisions, and I think your talk about the primaries is something I really like, because that is so often the way we select who we're who will be the representative, right? And this
Yeah,
kind of this weird process that we try to make democratic, but it's strange, and it's you know like delegates like the and super delegates is like this weird nonsense. And I think especially this year with in the Democratic Party, with how everything worked out in there, like it's just this kind of weird process that is so far out of the light sometimes.
yeah,
I think that's perfect.
and it ends up making a lot of people really upset.
Yep.
And
That's for sure.
yeah, yeah. So I want to just pivot for 1 second from light to sound, actually, because there was one thing I noticed, which was simply that you hear Ray Fiennes' breathing like a
Mm,
lot, and very often, um, it's like probably the most prominent moment was when he goes into the Pope's room when he's not supposed to be in there. And it's like, how sometimes when you've got, you're breathing through your nose and there's just, for whatever reason, there's just a really faint whistle.
hmm
It's very, very faint, very, very, very faint. But it happens several times in the movie. And I was like, that's interesting. Why? like
mm,
why do that? I mean, it's just a character note of just like humanize the guy a little bit, make him feel a little bit more like a fallible man, that
hmm.
he just like you, sometimes his nose whistles. I don't know. I definitely
It-
noticed it though.
Look, man, maybe he was just sick that day on set. Okay.
I mean, that's possible, but if that were so,
No, I
like
think they would have
you wouldn't. You,
they would have fixed the dialogue, if that, like, they would
yeah,
have fixed that.
yeah,
This
yeah,
this is the wonderful thing about movies, is it is a contained, controlled system in
right,
which every choice is a choice. And so I don't have an easy answer for you for like the why of that, but I absolutely think that was intentional.
yeah,
Like here's the thing. I mean, Ray Fiennes is not a young man
hmm
anymore.
hmm
I was actually shocked that he was in his 60s. I didn't think that, but
hmm
it's true. Um, but they make him he looks old in
yeah,
this movie. I think the one thing they do, I don't think they have to do too much to him, because again, he's a man in his 60s, but they put like the liver spots on on his head,
right,
and like that's like an instant trick for, oh, this dude's old.
yeah,
And so he just does look kind of old and tired, and I think the breathing is part of that. Like, he feels like even if he's not rushing, even if he's not running, he just feels like he's always kind of slightly out of breath a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what you're experiencing there.
I absolutely agree. I think it's just part of his holistic performance to just be this man who is, physically, spiritually, mentally struggling with this situation,
Yeah.
and this little touch of like his breathing is labored is too strong a word, but sounds ever so slightly unhealthy. It's like, yeah, that's a man who's not at his best.
Mhm.
And yeah, I agree. I noticed they basically gave him liver spots to make him look older.
He's like, there's another movie that came out this year. I think it's out actually. I don't know. The Return. He plays Odysseus,
Mhm,
returning at the end of the Odyssey,
mhm.
and he's like playing an old man in that, but he's like fit, like 'cause he has to string the bow.
Yeah,
So it's a real contrast to see these two characters.
that's funny.
I don't know if this movie ever came out. I don't remember hearing about this movie at all.
The Odyssey movie. Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't hear anything about it
I
either.
saw a trailer at one point last year, but I thought, I assumed it was coming out in 25, but it says it came out 2024.
That's funny. I was just wondering. I was just curious just now. When did the Grand Budapest Hotel come out? Because that to me feels like a recent Ray Fiennes movie, and of course it was 11 years ago. So
Oh my
um,
god. Why do you do this to me?
I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the in Bruges young man anymore. Like, our
Yeah,
guy's getting old.
yeah, yeah.
We're all getting old.
It happens, or so I hear.
Yeah. So I did like, the one moment in this movie that really did affect me is his quote that kind of kicks off the conclave. Um, as a person who has many times throughout their life struggled with what I do and don't believe, I loved his like rumination on doubt.
Mhm.
So I have it right here. It says, "Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there will be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith. Let us pray for that God will grant us a pope who doubts, and let him grant us a pope who sins and asks for forgiveness and who carries on." I love that. Not even from like a religious perspective, but just like certainty, the evil of certainty. He says what he says is that the greatest sin, the sin I worry about the most, is the sin of certainty that I'm right, that other people are wrong, certainty that this is the way, that there isn't, like all these. I love the idea of the sin of certainty
Mhm.
and the power of doubt, and this combination of doubt and faith to make it through uncertain times. I think it's just a really really powerful message that spoke to me.
I agree. I mean, I think it's a broadly appealing, moral lesson out even outside of religious context, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think very much it applies to what we see in the movie, because both factions, or all factions, you could say, all share the sin of certainty.
Mhm.
They certain that the church needs to be more conservative to fight against to fight the war
The
against
evil Muslims.
the
Yeah.
evil
Yeah.
Muslims, certain that perspective is evil, and we need to
Mhm.
do anything necessary. It justifies any level of compromise to defeat that.
Mhm.
And then of course we win through by not being certain. So I think the movie is optimistic in terms of who it selects. Although I do agree that it's kind of ridiculous to select somebody on the basis of a 45-second speech after you know nothing about them.
But like, how much of individual people's like voting in democratic elections is just that, right?
Mhm.
Like, someone said something really. I mean, like, I would like to believe that the majority of people vote on policy and like identify someone whose policies they agree with and thinks they would be good at the job. But so much of it sometimes is just like, was that guy like really good at
Yeah.
speaking? Did that guy really inspire me with his voice?
Right. And to be, I think there's even a relatively reasonable case to be made to say, does it even make sense to vote on policy when you know that this person didn't have those policies 5 minutes ago? And
Sure.
are they maybe just saying that to get elected because that's the popular thing to say right now?
Sure.
And when they get into office, they're not, they're either going to change their mind or they're just not going to pursue that as a priority.
Mhm.
I think that's actually more the rule than the exception, to be honest. So
Yeah. What a fucked up, terrible system. That's unfortunately the best one we have.
right, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, thanks, Conclave. Appreciate that. But I mean, like, look, this is we've done 3 movies now for the Oscars. Obviously, I think unquestionably this is my favorite of the 3 so far. And this is kind of what I expect out of Oscar caliber movie. Like this is the kind of conversation I want to watch a movie and walk away from. Even though I don't think this movie was perfect, I agree with all the story complaints you have. I share them. But I loved thinking about this movie. And yeah, I mean, I just loved experiencing this movie. Gosh, the acting. Like, I don't think we've hit that drum enough, but holy crap. Like, not just Ralph Fiennes, but Stanley Tucci's incredible in this movie. John Lithgow, incredible in this movie.
Yeah.
Just, man.
Yeah, John Lithgow. Oh, I guess we didn't talk about his character too much, but just I think he plays it so perfectly where he could be telling the truth.
Yeah.
And he could be lying, and I have no idea. I flip a coin. It's great.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I was studying his performance, and that's like one thing this movie really gets you to do is like Lawrence walks up to these people, confronts them, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to be able to tell by what he does which way it's the truth or not. Let's look at his reaction to these to allegations and see what he does. It's like, fuck, he's giving me nothing.
Yeah.
He's giving me nothing.
Yeah. Which could mean that he's a really good liar, and it could mean that he is actually innocent and he's just so upset at being accused. Yeah.
I do like this idea that this always 10 moves ahead Pope like orchestrated all of this stuff, not only to bring the woman to Rome because he knew his days were numbered and that this conclave was going to be happening, but also to have Tremblay be the one to request it, because then he would be able to pin that kind of gamesmanship on Lithgow. Yeah. Like it's just it's like perfectly Machiavellian level of manipulation, but I think there's definitely room in the text of the movie to say that that's exactly how everything went down.
Totally. I mean, I think probably the biggest supporting piece of evidence that it is indeed a conspiracy and not just a bunch of stuff that happened is the fact that the Pope still has the secret report in his room, like in the headboard. Yeah. And it's like, why would you do that? It's like so that someone will find it. Like, otherwise you throw it away or destroy it or something.
Yeah. No, totally agree.
And again, the purpose of the report is not proof, but it's enough to ruin everyone's confidence in the target. So,
yep. All right. Anything else you wanted to say about Conclave or Catholicism? You got any more?
No, you got to listen to Kingslingers for our thoughts on Catholicism, of course.
Touche. All right. Well, that was Conclave, the third movie we have covered in the series. Next week, Matt, we'll be talking about the film Anora. This was actually one that for a long time, everyone thought was going to be the frontrunner for Best Picture. It is a film by Sean Baker, who I don't know if you've ever seen any Sean Baker films, Matt.
Doesn't ring a bell.
He wrote a film called Tangerine that I really enjoyed. He wrote and directed a film called The Florida Project that I loved to death. He also wrote a film called Red Rocket that I never saw that one. But I think this is his largest, most ambitious movie. And yeah, like I said, was the frontrunner for a while. I think it's kind of fallen out of that now. Although one thing we haven't talked about with Best Picture is it is ranked choice voting. So it's going to be a battle between Emilia Perez and The Brutalist for the number one spot. But I think the people that aren't going to vote Emilia Perez number one, I have a sneaking suspicion, are going to vote it not number two. So a film like Anora might be like wins by default because everyone that loves the Brutalist is going to rank it number 1, and they're going to rank Anora number 2. Everyone that loves Emilia Perez is going to rank it number 1 and rank Anora number 2. And so it can win that way. That's the cool thing about ranked choice voting. So it still has a shot, but we'll see if it's worthy of that shot when we talk about it next week.
What a perfect explanation to follow up a discussion of this movie.
I mean, look, man, let me tell you something. The Academy Awards is just Conclave. Like, there literally last week was a story leaked to a small outlet that they knew would catch fire about how the Brutalist uses AI. Perfectly timed leak. We don't know who did it, but sure will make Adrian Brody's campaign for Best Actor a little bit more complicated because they used a little AI model to slightly help his Hungarian voice sound a little bit more authentic. I mean, that's just releasing the report on on Tremblay. Like that's just what it is.
Totally.
And the Oscars have always done shit like this. This has always happened. Yeah. So it's just Conclave. It's perfect.
It's a dirty business, that Academy Awards.
Doof. All right. Before we go, Matt, I did want to talk to you about the television show Severance briefly. We did a whole episode on season 1 of the show because we both liked it so much, and season 2 is happening now. The first episode is out. Technically, the second episode is already out, Matt, but I haven't watched it yet. I hope you haven't either, so we can have this conversation.
I have only watched the first episode of season 2.
Okay, perfect. So what'd you think, Matt? What'd you think of... I think, by the way, folks, I think we're just going to have a segment at the very end of each of our episodes for the next 8 weeks or so, however many episodes there are, that's just going over Severance. It's a perfect kind of week-to-week show, and I'm really enjoying it. So I want to talk to you about it week to week.
Yeah, are we doing full spoilers here?
Yeah. Full spoilers for everything through episode 1 of season 2 of Severance.
Yeah. So, I mean, I felt like it was a return to form. I felt like... this is the next episode of Severance, right? Which is exactly what you want to feel when you're watching, when they return with the second season of something that has had a break. Is there's this fear of like, are they going to be able to find their sea legs again? And it's like, nope, feels right. But also at the same time, it feels like, okay, I feel like we're doing something different. Like I feel like season 1 was one story, and maybe this is going to be a different story, and we're going different places. We're already putting some potential dramatic elements in play. There's already mysteries and questions being introduced. I know you came to me with a very disturbing theory already, and it's only the first episode. So I'm just psyched. I'm just very happy to get to watch this, live this time instead of catching up afterward like the last season. How about you?
I really do think this is like the perfect mixed mystery box show. Like we spent a lot of time talking about mystery box television. We're in the middle of watching the TV show From our bonus Patreon podcast, which you should check out, patreon.com/doofmedia. That is a mystery box show, and it's a mystery box show we're enjoying very, very much. But like this is like if you wanted to like craft in a lab like the perfect mystery box show that is just enough mystery to keep you engaged, but also is still focusing on character and has this just perfect conceit that the metaphor of it keeps you engaged. I think that's what Severance is. And I completely agree with you. Season 2 didn't miss a beat so far for me. We talked a few weeks ago how worried I was about this season, though. Like it's been 3 years since season 1. There were a lot of production issues. They spent so much money on this thing, and I was really worried that something was going to be lost in the number of creatives that like joined and then left and all this stuff. And it doesn't feel like it has. I do agree with you that things feel a little bit different. One of the things I felt, and this is very early, it's only the first episode, so I could completely reverse on this next week, but I felt like one of my favorite things about Severance was just kind of the underlying horror of how they've accentuated like office life, like just like the egg party socials and the absurdity of it, and like the pains in the ass bosses, and all just like these extremely mundane office life things that are these people's entire existence. And I feel like the show is moving away from that being kind of a core tenet of what the show is doing. I,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Like I loved that stuff. I'm okay with it moving away from that, but it does feel like we're kind of starting to leave that behind. And maybe like I'll be eating my foot when literally the next episode is exactly that again. But I don't think so, because we've got to move into different things and explore different things, and I think that's what it's interested in doing. Um,
Yeah.
so that's one feeling I had watching this episode.
I just simply agree with you that I suspect this season is going to move away from the like almost office satire. Which is it's funny. I was commenting on the fact that when you just describe Severance to people, or at least I'll speak for myself, when Severance was first described to me, my first thought was like, oh, so it's like an office satire, it's like a comedy, which is like 10% of what Severance is, I guess, but
Mm-hmm.
and not really anybody's favorite 10%, but a very like entertaining 10%. Well, one thing to me, I just along the lines of like kind of shifting what the show is. Like, I agree, we're probably gonna sort of tone down the office satire element. I hope we don't lose the kind of sense of whimsy. I don't know if whimsy is the right word.
I
Sense
think
of
it
like
is.
ethereality and weirdness. There's a weirdness. There's an uncanniness that to me is it's not quite Severance if it doesn't have that. And I'm not saying I think they're going to. I'm just saying I get like there's always a risk with something like this that it becomes really dark and self-serious, and um like, which could be good in its own way, and there are plenty of things that are dark and self-serious and are good. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I really like about this is this very unique tone that Severance has always carried.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm confident it's not going to lose that. I think that it might shift and change a little bit, but I think this episode really nails that. Like, I think like Milchek is just a great character and
Mhm.
continues to be performed wonderfully. Um, and he brings this like even the scene. Oh my god, the scene with Adam Scott kind of talking about his 4 new friends, and when she says, "I'm not a friend, actually. I'm a superior, so I can't be your friend."
Uh-huh.
And just like the long pause and just 3 new friends. Like that's just perfect, man. That's just
Yeah.
it's perfect, and it's Severance. It's just quintessential Severance, and I
Yeah.
adored it. So I don't think it's going to lose that.
Yeah.
I do have a question for you about like your investment in the show and what parts of it you're most invested in. And I'm stealing this from a podcast I heard. So it's not an original thought, but what what it if you had to like gauge your investment in, like, let's say, the central mystery of what microdata processing is actually doing, like the answer to that mystery question, which we get a little hint of at the end of this episode, like what percentage of your enjoyment in the show is based on figuring out that mystery?
uh Not a high percent, not, definitely less than 50%. I enjoy the show episode to episode, and it's not keeping me on the hook by teasing me with answers. It's keeping me on the hook by keeping me engaged with the moment to moment struggles of the characters. Um, so I really I've thought about this a bit, and I'm basically like, even if the ending reveal of this whole show is something either super predictable or random or dumb, I don't think it'll harm the show for me that much. It might diminish the show for me a bit. I'm not going to say it'll have no impact. I think conversely, an incredibly solid mystery box reveal can really can really elevate something. Um,
Hmm.
but it's just not the most important thing about the show to me. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think we're aligned there. I put it in my head at about 10%. It
Mhm.
was interesting because like the 2 people that I was listening to talk about this, one of them said 0%, I don't care about it at all, and the other said, oh, like at least 50%, probably
Uh,
closer to 60%.
Interesting.
And and so I am not at the point where it's like 0%. I am invested in that mystery, like I that the cliffhanger ending of this episode where it's strongly hinted at that what they are refining is versions of people.
Uh-huh.
And in oh god, what are the why can't I remember characters' names anymore? I think my brain is melting.
That's
I'm
okay.
just in Mark S's case, it happens to be his wife, right?
Uh-huh.
So they're like, whether this is a clone version or what have you, they are refining the person.
Yeah. And
And that was enough to get me to go ooh.
yeah.
But yeah, no, that is not my drive to continue the series. My drive is like, who are these characters and what are they going to do next? And right now, the mystery that is really I'm obsessed with is like what's going on with the outside version of the characters is the mystery
Yeah.
that's pulling me along. Is like, what does outside Mark's life look like? Because I don't know about you, but like everything we're told about what happened after the events of the season finale in this episode, I just assumed was bullshit.
Yeah.
I just like assumed that Lumen is lying about every single one of those things. I don't think they're like world famous. I don't think, and I think all of the Lumen, like, we're gonna fix this stuff is like just awful
Yeah.
bullshit. The freaking bobbing for pumpkins or for pineapple. Can we just both agree that's an insane? Pineapples are heavy and pokey.
And pokey, yeah, you don't want to hit that with your face. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all that. Yeah, I was like felt mildly teased that we didn't get to find out any of the any of what the Audis are doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
I do
yeah.
wonder how long we're going to hold on that, because I think it was very effective for this episode, because it really got us like as a reintroduction to the show and to the world of the show and the concept, like keeping us limited with Mark in where we only experience what his life is, because he's like doing the, as we talked about last time, the absolutely horrifying concept of you finish work at the end of the day, finally you get in the elevator, and then instantaneously you're back and you have a full day in front of you, and just I continue every time I get on my elevator at work at the end of the day. That's what I'm thinking of every single time.
You hear that ding.
But so
yeah.
I think locking us in with the any characters only, I think, was the right choice for this episode. And I am just curious, like, how long they'll hold on to that. Like, will I'm gonna watch this week's episode tomorrow. Like, will that start with Audi Mark, and we'll learn kind of what went down.
Yeah. I was just ruminating on like the idea of different people having different levels of investment in the mystery. And I think for me, like specifically the macro data refinement thing, to me, I love as part of the satire, because it's like it's ridiculous. It's like the Brian David Gilbert earn 20K every month by being your own boss skit, where it's like it's intentionally nonsense.
Yeah.
Now, if there's a layer of meaning under that nonsense, that's like a bonus, but I don't need it to be, because it functions as just like, yeah, we you look at the numbers, and
the ones that feel good.
if this one feels scary, it goes, yeah, like it's absurdism. And now like, so I'm actually more interested in mysteries like what's like what is this Kier company and what are they trying to do in a larger sense.
Yeah.
And even that is not 50%. It's a small percent.
Yeah. And like how common is Severance, right? Like, because we keep get like this severed floor is enormous and maze-like, right? And we know there are different groups. But then in this week's episode, we learn that there's like different branches, and like some of them seem really poor. Like the Italian guy's branch had a rope instead of a ladder. And so like, was that bullshit or was that real? Like how many different branches and severed people are we talking about here? Like, because you get the feeling sometimes watching the show that it's just these four guys and that's it, and then occasionally like Burke shows up, and you have those, so you have a little bit more, but it often feels like it's like the only severed people in the entire world are just these people, and then things happen that makes you question that. But I think that the show is intentionally kind of keeping the truth of the world like close to its chest.
Yeah. I think one fun thing that has always tickled me about watching the show is just like you imagine what the world is like to these innies, where you go down a hall, you find a new room, and this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. It's a new room. Like 7 things have happened to you in your life, and and this is the 8th. You found the new room. Isn't that cool? It's
Well,
such an interesting like science fiction concept to me.
yeah. What is wind like? Is it like someone breathing on you?
Yeah. What was the sky like? I don't know.
By the way, her indignant, "Do you even have a stepbrother?" was like, this is why I love this show, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's just funny shit. Like, that's the thing she's pissed off about.
Yeah. This is maybe silly and inconsequential, but like, did Mark S expect anyone to buy that the letter that he wrote was from the other guy, or was that just more of a misdirection?
I have to be convinced that was just misdirection, because like, yeah, like, I mean, the movie, like, you didn't even try to disguise your handwriting. It's like, he's not stupid, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think he just knew it would pull Milchek down,
Uh-huh.
and then he could distract him some other way, or maybe it would get him to the office, and then he could get there. I think he had to have known the entire time that they're gonna immediately know it was him.
Probably. I held on to the idea that like, well, maybe he's he's kind of, I mean, he's not stupid, you're right, but like this version of him doesn't have any life experience, so it's possible that he would make a stupid mistake. But that's not really the kind of thing the show has done with his character. Like, he just
Yeah.
in any Mark does not make naive dumb mistakes like that.
Yeah, I mean, in the first season, when we saw Helly like continually try to outsmart the system,
Mhm.
Mark was the one that was always like, "Nah, that's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work." So it just seemed like it built him up as like, he knows how all the stuff is gonna go down. So yeah, I didn't think, I thought he was intentionally busting himself,
Yeah.
to draw them into conflict, to make his demand, to get his team back. Which, I mean,
Yeah.
why does that work, Matt?
There's so many layers to this. Like, your brain goes crazy thinking about it, because it's like I feel like the 4 macrodat refiners are important. Like, they can't just be replaced.
Yeah.
I don't know why I say that.
Okay, so we can briefly talk about my theory, because I think it relates to this.
Sure.
And I've seen this theory echoed several places, so this is not something I independently came up on my own. But I think, and honestly, I've seen it so many places that it's made me doubt the theory, as like, it's become so obvious that maybe the gamble of the show is that you're going to think this, but it's actually not true. But the theory is that when we meet Helly R again, that is not Helly, actually. That is Helena, her Audi, and she has kind of been sent down there to spy on them, to like figure stuff out about, like, because they don't actually know that much about what happened when they were released, when they got outside. So Helly is kind of is sent down there as a spy to figure out what happened to them, what were their experiences, and I don't know. I go back and forth. Like, I watched the episode twice, and the second time I watched it with that concept in mind, and I utterly convinced myself that it was the case. But then it's like, you hear about how cops go into like a murder investigation with the victim in mind, and then suddenly every piece of evidence is like, oh yes, this is clearly showing that this guy's guilty.
Yeah.
Because you're blinded to every other piece of evidence that contradicts it. So I don't know. I think it's fun because, like, we see her being secretive and lying to the group, but like, there's plausible explanations on both sides for why she would do that.
Yeah. Right. Because I admit I did not think of this. I thought she was ashamed to learn that she was, a Kier, and thus was hiding it. But I like your theory a lot. I mean, I think the closest thing to a theory that I came up with, because I don't really intentionally sit around in theory craft. I just kind of things occur to me while I'm watching. But one thing that occurred to me was like, I don't believe that it's been 6 months.
Yeah.
I feel like I mean, yeah, I guess just what you just said, like, nothing that Milchik told them is true. This is more likely to be like the next week than it is 6 months.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, one one reason for that is we see Miss Cobell get fired at the end of season 1.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of season 2, Milchek is moving into Cobell's office actively.
Right.
And it's like, there's a part of me that's like, well, if 5 months have passed, who was running the severed floor in that intermediary time?
Yeah.
Like, why is Milchek just getting set up here just when Mark S comes back down?
Right. I agree.
The one thing I definitely do believe is Mark S is back there specifically sent by his Audi because he's like, find my wife.
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting. I hadn't had this pointed out to me, but like, so we know that the last thing he says before he is the failsafe is turned off is she's alive, right?
Yeah.
And he's talking about his wife, but what's happening in the Audi world at that time is the baby has just been kidnapped by Miss Cobell, right?
Yeah.
And so like it is very easy to believe that the interpretation of Mark screaming she's alive would just be like the baby, baby, she's alive, she's okay. So I do wonder like if there's actually going to be any successful communication to Mark's sister that, hey, remember when we thought my wife was dead? She's not. She's alive and she's down on the severed floor. Because I had convinced myself that Audi Mark sent any Mark back down to find her, that like he sent him to do that. It wasn't just this is what Mark S his plan is going to be down there, but that his Audi sent him to do that. But like, how would he know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see.
Right. I mean, so like, it's entirely possible that everything that Mark S, that Audi Mark did basically came to nothing. Everything that Audi Irving did came to nothing. And Helena briefly made a scene which possibly could have been covered up. So like the idea that, oh, this was a huge scandal that caused all this, it's like, no, I don't believe that.
Yeah, no way. Absolutely not. I don't think the Keanu Reeves voiced stop motion video is going to be shown to anyone but the 4 of them.
That was enjoyable sitting there being like, is that
it's one of those wonderful things the show can do. Did you hear about the pop-up that in Grand Central Station?
No.
So like Apple is really like throwing the gauntlet down for the show. I think they spent a lot of money on it. And so they're like, what we haven't seen in Apple TV. Apple TV has been this really interesting experiment so far. Like it is one of the least watched streaming platforms by far. And a lot of that is that Apple has just really not pushed it very aggressively. I mean, they've still marketed their stuff and, they have occasionally breakthrough hits like Ted Lasso and I think like Severance, but like Apple is an enormous, powerful, very rich company. And if they wanted to like use the full weight of all of that, they could.
Yeah.
And we really haven't seen them do it on anything Apple TV Plus related. And I really feel like this show is the first time they're really starting to flex those muscles. So basically what they did is in the middle of Grand Central Station, they, within like a glass box, they set up the office in Severance and had 5 of the actors from the show,
oh my God,
like just sit in the box for hours and just like play at working.
Oh my God.
I think the only one they didn't get was oh my gosh, who was it?
I'm gonna guess John Turturro.
Yes, it was Turturro. Turturro's the only one that wasn't there, but they had Adam Scott, they had Zach Cherry who plays Dylan, they had Britt Lauer who plays Helly, they had Milchek there, and I believe they had Patricia Arquette. Miss Cobell was there as well.
Oh man.
So that's like a big flex, man. I mean, like that's not only did they set up this really expensive thing in one of the busiest places on earth, but they like got the actors to come out and spend a day doing this. And like, this is, I really do think we're going to see Apple really, really start to push this thing. I think they've already greenlit season 3. I think they're already working on it. So they're really behind this thing in a way we haven't seen before. And I'm curious what that ends up looking like. This seems like a show that could break out and be like the next big not only appointment viewing, but like water cooler, everyone is watching it show.
I hope so. It's definitely popular in the circles that I run in, but
Yeah.
I know you're right that it's not like objectively doing great numbers.
It's
So,
just because no one has Apple TV Plus. Like it's just, So, but maybe they will.
I hope so. Yeah, it deserves to be popular. I love the show so much.
Yeah. I think Ben Stiller directed this episode. I love it. I love what he does. The entire opening sequence where Mark rushes out of the elevator and then runs around the office with Ben's camera just going nuts. I just loved every little bit of that moment.
So some of that's got to be CGI, right? Like the camera can't physically do.
Yeah.
But it was so seamless. I was shocked, honestly. I mean, I know CGI is good these days, but I was just like, from moment to moment, I was like, is this a real man running, or is this the CGI man running? Because I honestly cannot tell.
Yeah.
I was impressed.
It was great.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. All right. That was fun. I enjoyed that. We'll check back next week after watching episode 2.
Sounds good.
All right. And that is going to do it for this week's episode. If you have any opinions on Conclave or on Severance season 2 or season 1, please reach out. We want to hear from you. You can email us at doofmedia@gmail.com. You can find us on Instagram at doofmedia, X at doofmedia. What else? Facebook, all the things. You can also go to reddit.com/doofmedia and find our subreddit, and there'll be a post for this episode. Matt, have we told the people about Flanagan's Wake on this show?
I don't think so.
That's a bad job, us.
That's right. Flanagan's Wake is the new podcast that Scott and I have started. We've released a couple of episodes now, a couple of episodes of covering Mike Flanagan's first 2 movies. I think they've been really great conversations. We're releasing them as video podcasts on YouTube.
Well, we're trying to.
But YouTube
one of them is currently blocked in the United States. So we're fighting it. Yeah. So what we're doing on those videos is we are showing clips if we're talking about something specific to a specific scene in those movies, like we did on Oculus this week. We're showing clips, and YouTube didn't like that. So
YouTube doesn't like it when you make content.
Yeah, it's textbook fair use. Literally, like if you open the textbook and look for fair use, what we're doing is why the law was created. It's a
picture of us.
Yeah. Hopefully we will win that appeal, but you can find episode 1 currently on YouTube, and you can find all of the episodes on any podcasting platform.
That's right. Yes. Also be sure to tell your OpenAI operator agent to subscribe to the podcast, because I don't know if you knew this, Scott, but now you don't need to touch the computer anymore. You just tell the agent what you want to happen.
Oh, good.
As of right now.
Can I make it sound like Scarlett Johansson?
That is the one thing it cannot legally do. They've permanently taken that away from us, and I'm so mad, honestly. No, okay. This is a 5-second sidebar.
Okay.
I use the Scarlett Johansson sound-alike voice exclusively for months, and I got used to that as the voice of ChatGPT. That was ChatGPT to me. I'm talking to ChatGPT. That's her voice. And then they took her away from me. And now you have to use a different voice. And they killed her. She's dead.
Well, Matt, some would say she was never alive in the first place.
Well, some would say
like,
that. What is the measure of a man, Scott?
I'm not going to tell people how to live their lives, but if you go to Scarlett Johansson and ask her to do a voice, and she says no, and then you hire a sound-alike to sound exactly like her without getting her permission, what did you expect to happen?
You know, the funny thing about this story is that allegedly she was not told to sound like Scarlett Johansson, but I feel like they just hired somebody who naturally sounds like Scarlett Johansson, because you listen to it, it's like, this is Scarlett Johansson.
Sure. I mean, they probably auditioned hundreds of people, and in some note, I hope someone sent an email, because it really helped with the lawsuit, that said, hey, this person sounds exactly like Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, I'm sure they did.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway,
please
subscribe on any of those platforms. except the Scarlett Johansson platform.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and pledge at any of the available levels we talked about our bonus podcast from. We also have Doof After Darks that we occasionally do. Matt, I think we recorded one that I've forgotten to edit, so I will do that this weekend and get that up.
Excellent.
So we occasionally just have bonus stuff and book clubs coming up, and you get to vote for books and things like that. So there's a lot of fun bonus content. Just check that out at patreon.com/doofmedia.
Yeah. Also, we'd appreciate it if you could give the Doofcast a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Every podcast review or rating really does influence the algorithm and helps other people to see our show. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. That's it for us this week. Next week, our Oscars catch-up series continues with our fourth film. I will be watching Anora. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.